Recording. Hello, I'm Jennifer Keller of the Westport Library. Today I'm happy to introduce another Sybil's List, this one for Fall-Winter 2020-2021. These books will be available through the library catalog as they are published, since some of them haven't been yet. And so if any of these sound interesting to you, please feel free to place a hold through the Westport Library website or call the patron service desk for any help that you need. So without further ado, here is Sybil Steinberg.
Hello, readers. I'm happy to be in touch with you again, especially since the library invited me to present a mini list, as Jennifer has told you, a shorter version of the 40-plus titles I usually throw at you. So this list has about 19 titles, easier for all of us to digest. There's another thing that's different about this list, and that is the effect of the pandemic on publishers. For many months, some of the bigger publishers, for instance, all the books under the Random House umbrella, Knopf, Doubleday, Pantheon, Crown, and so forth, were stuck in warehouses that remained closed. Those publishers offered me PDFs that I could read online, but I refused because I just don't absorb or enjoy reading a book that way. Now the pipeline is beginning to open and the books are beginning to arrive. But many of the big books of the season, which ordinarily I would have read by now, are just finally arriving in my mailbox. So for instance, I have read only 4 of the 10 books nominated for the NBA, National Book Award, the Fiction Award, and only 5 of the 13 books on the Booker Prize long list. On the brighter side of that, I was able to get galleys or hardcover books for many of the smaller publishing houses who had smaller warehouses and they were open. So I read some excellent books, which I am very happy to recommend. The top one, the unbelievable one, is A Burning by Megha Majumdar. As incendiary as its title, this stunning debut novel is set in contemporary India, where political corruption takes its human toll. When Jivan, a young Muslim woman, witnesses a terrorist attack on a stalled train and realizes 100 victims are being burned alive, she sees that the police are standing by studiously doing nothing. She naively posts a comment on a social network, wondering, and this is the quote, "If the police didn't help ordinary people like you and me, if the police watch them die, doesn't that mean that the government is also a terrorist?" Jivan soon finds herself in prison, awaiting a trial where she'll be accused of treason. Now, Jivan lives in the sweltering slum in Kolkata. She dropped out of high school and a promising athletic career to help support her parents. Her former physical education teacher and fond mentor, a man called P.T. Sir, could testify to her good character, and he says he will. But he is gradually drawn into the activities of a far-right, militant Hindu party, the government party, and thus he dare not say anything against the government in Jivan's trial. Another person is equally poised to help Jivan. She's a transgender woman named Lovely, whom Jivan has tutored in English, but gradually Lovely is terrorized into silence to save her own skin. The consuming corruption of politics is vividly described here, as is the squalid world of slum dwellers, which is evoked in matter-of-fact detail that is just stunning. Both timely as for its subject and written with amazingly consummate skill, this is an unforgettable tale. The next book is night, sleep, death, the stars. By the way, it's from a poem by Walt Whitman. So are you tired of Joyce Carol Oates' plentitude of books? Don't be. Read this one because she is at her best in this long but involving novel that follows an upper middle class family as it reacts to the death of its patriarch. Whitey McLaren is the former mayor of his town, a very much admired man, very civically involved, of his town in upstate New York. When he's on the thruway and he sees two policemen viciously assaulting a dark-skinned young man whose car they pulled over, he impulsively acts as a good Samaritan. He tries to intervene. The police, who don't know who he is, taser him at close range. He has a stroke and later dies. And the police, of course, cover up their part in his death. The novel follows the lives of his widow, Jessalyn, whose emotional devastation is coupled with her frantic fear that she won't be able to cope with the details of daily living without her husband, who used to handle everything. Two of the four McLaren-grown children have their own ideas of how to keep the family together, even as both of them, the eldest brother and his sister, are each of them floundering in marital strife. The youngest daughter is facing crucial decisions about her future, and the youngest son, an artistic and bohemian type, feels even more of an outsider in his family. When Jessalyn, their mother, begins a friendship and then a romance with a man of whom they disapprove, more family dynamics come into play. All of the characters here are seen in sometimes, often, brilliant set pieces, and against the background of contemporary America's economic and political turmoil. Although this novel ranges to almost 1,000 pages, its portrait of a recognizably typical family is totally compelling. What Are You Going Through by Sigrid Nunez? This book, you probably read about it in various places. It has received wide critical recognition, all of it positive. This is very much a different kind of book, a bit of a challenge, and very exciting. Nunez writes in a restrained, straightforward prose that accentuates the power of this unsettling, provocative meditation on friendship, loyalty, compassion, and the difficulties of existence. The narrator has promised a friend, a fellow writer, to help her end her ordeal with terminal cancer by administering euthanasia when her suffering becomes intense. And by the way, not a secret, the sick woman strongly resembles Susan Sontag, whom Nunez knew at close range. So, in the book, the conversations between the women are not dreary. They sparkle with intellectual insights, and they're often quite funny and definitely endearing. The narrative seems to meander in and out of the women's lives, but you soon realize in totality, Nunez is asking larger questions about living and dying in our country and in the world. After she's visited her friend in the hospital, the narrator goes to a lecture at a local college given by a famous academic who proclaims that the world itself is absolutely dying from climate change and our planet is soon doomed to extinction. So there's death and death. He is then revealed as the narrator's husband. As the two women implement their plan, the narrator becomes aware of the shadow world of grief and despair, and she discerns a common need among the dying to talk about their life to a compassionate listener. So in this novel, Nunez is examining the larger themes of life and death, the specter of existential loneliness, and the consolation of friendship. You must believe me, this is not a downer. There is so much humor here, and the writing has a buoyancy within its intellectual depth. Homeland Elegy is another book that's received wide attention. Jacques Tar wrote the Pulitzer Prize play Disgraced. Here he again explores the dilemma of being perceived as an alien in American society because of ethnic origin. In a distinctive blend of memoir, history, essay, and cultural analysis, this book accrues to an examination of the American dream. Much of the novel is autobiographical, closely following the author's life. The narrator, as is Akhtar, is of Muslim heritage, born in a suburb of Milwaukee, as the author, the son of a cardiologist who once treated Donald Trump and is now an enthusiastic advocate of Trump's far-right agenda. His son, the narrator, on the other hand, is the product of a liberal education. He graduated from Brown, like the author, and has gone on to a stellar career as a dramatist, a member of the cultural elite, and the possessor of a sophisticated, financially secure lifestyle, except that he is not white. And he is subject to the prejudices and fears of the people around him. This narrative is made up of many sections that read like mini essays, as the narrator reveals the different personal experiences he endured after 9/11 as a man of Muslim heritage who is both celebrated in his field and scorned, embraced, and feared. Paradoxically, he cannot feel comfortable in either identity, as a Muslim or as an American. Within its distinctive, fragmented style, the novel is a profoundly unsettling description of the loneliness of a man and a generation pining for true acceptance and a true home. The Lying Life of Adults, Elena Ferrante. Ferrante's brilliant Neapolitan quartet ranged over a half century and required readers to find the subtext in the lives of two intimate friends and the society in which they grew up. Not until the fourth novel were the themes neatly tied together. This novel is far easier to read and appreciate. And if anything, the symbolic thread is so clearly and frequently expressed that it's impossible to miss. So instead of the squalid atmosphere of the slum section of Naples, in which the previous novels were based, this one takes place in a more affluent section of town, in an upper middle class home of two teachers, a professor and a teacher, and their daughter, Giovanna. Books, music, and sophisticated discussions form the environment of Giovanna's youth. But one day when she's 12, she overhears her beloved father saying that she is becoming ugly, like his sister. She thinks he's referring to her physical appearance, when in reality, he fears that in her adolescent moodiness and her poor scholastic record, she's beginning to resemble the sister he despises, Giovanna's estranged aunt, Vittoria. So Giovanna insists on meeting her aunt, who is indeed a vulgar woman, hysterically obsessed with her dead lover, whose death she blames on Giovanna's father. When Vittoria mentions a bracelet that she has sent to Giovanni and her birth a long time ago, Giovanna is now an adolescent, which Giovanna never received, but has seen on the wrist of the mother of her two best friends, the deception of her parents' marriage is revealed. She finds that many lies exist under the surface of adult life. This novel would be a great introduction to Ferrante for people who haven't read her previous books. Boy in the Field, Margot Livesey. Like all of Livesey's exquisite novels, this one is a blend of the mundane and the mystical. Three siblings walking home from school in a town near Oxford, England, discover the unconscious body of a teenage boy in a field. He has been stabbed. He will recover thanks to this timely discovery, but the identity of the assailant proves not to be as important as the after effect on the lives of the siblings and their various coming of age experiences after this salient event. The story is told through their alternating perspectives as they individually become aware of the existence of evil, even in their cloistered, comfortable community. Their home life is warm, happy, chaotic, and safe, but they begin to look outward and wonder about the larger world. Matthew, the eldest, becomes obsessed with finding the boy's assailant, and he speculates about the hidden lives of others in his village. Zoe, the middle child, discovers the sexual allure of her adolescent body and begins an affair with an older man. Duncan, who was adopted, suddenly decides that immediately he must find his biological mother. Meanwhile, the fragile bonds in their parents' apparently happy marriage become evident. This is his theme. Can't help it. It's in a lot of books. During the course of the novel, each of the siblings experiences a slightly mystical out-of-body experience, sort of a transcendence of reality. This is the distinctive theme in all of Margot Livesey's novels, and one of the reasons that I adore every one of them. She succeeds in illuminating the possibilities of other worlds adjacent to this one, a shimmering transparency that holds the secret to human existence. Artifacts by Arlene Hayman. The author is a psychiatrist psychoanalyst whose previous book, you might remember, was Scary Old Sex, which I talked about, I think, 3 lists back. She has a forthright view of human relationships, especially the complexities of sexual desire in women striving to be both independent and sexually satisfied. Lottie, the heroine, is born in the 1940s to a distracted mother and an embittered father. Early on, she's fascinated by nature and the mysteries of the human body. She yearns for a career in science. But, as is expected of her, she marries her high school sweetheart. Soon, she is frustrated in her typical 1950s, 60s marriage. Bravely, she opts out of the marriage, gets a divorce, even though she will be a single mother. Yet, at the same time, she manages to get through graduate school by juggling her responsibilities in the lab and with her young daughter. These life passages are described with excellent, insightful details. Finally, Lottie achieves a successful career in biology as a biologist, and eventually, her true identity assured, she's ready to marry again. This is a wise, perceptive, and witty novel, a portrait of a woman who is determined to fulfill her intellectual ambition in spite of the disapproving attitude of her social milieu. The Bass Rock. In this novel, we encounter women who are not as brave, perhaps, and not as lucky. It's by Evie Wyld, and Wyld is well known in England and sells very well for her 2 previous novels, which I have read and enjoyed. In each of them, women are repressed and mistreated by their fathers, lovers, and husbands. She writes with fierce energy and scorn, and while the details of her novels are dark, Her luminous prose is mesmerizing. The characters here live in three historical periods, and the narrative alternates among them in sometimes challenging ways. It takes a little while till you get into it. So in the present day, Viviane is just getting over a nervous breakdown at the end of her marriage, staying alone at her recently deceased grandmother's house in a village on the sea in Scotland. A big rock, the Bass Rock of the title, dominates the harbor offshore, seeming to represent looming violence. So then there are flashbacks in another section, and Vivian's grandmother comes to life at the time when she is trying to exist with a new husband who cruelly mistreats her, even while she's raising her husband's two sons from his first marriage. And then, even as she discovers that he's having an affair. The third narrator is a boy called Joseph who lived centuries ago, we don't even know what century, in this same forbidding area of Scotland. He falls in love with a girl, Sarah, that his father has saved from being burned as a witch. But Sarah, Ra, has her own means of survival. Interspersed within these three stories are vignettes of women who have been victims of male violence throughout the generation. If this sounds hard to take and not exciting to read, I just have to convince you. Consider that Wilde writes so seductively and creates characters who are so interesting that the book is compulsively readable. I could not put it down. Hieroglyphics, Jill McCorkle. Jill McCorkle has been published by Algonquin for I think at least 30 years now. If you haven't read any of her books, this is a good way to start. A lifetime of memories is slowly revealed in this affecting portrait of a marriage. Lil and Frank, who married young, had now retired to North Carolina after many years in Boston, where Frank was a professor at college. Long ago, they were brought together by a tragic coincidence. Lil's mother died in the famous 1942 fire at the Coconut Grove in Boston. If you grew up as I did on the Eastern Seaboard, you remember the Coconut Grove fire. So Frank's father died in a train wreck, which also really occurred apparently in North Carolina in 1943. And they were brought together by this mutual tragedy. Now that they have moved to North Carolina to be closer to their adult daughter, Frank wants to revisit his childhood home, but he's a stranger in town. And when he goes to the house and asks to come in, he frightens Shelley, a single mother now living there. She is concerned about losing her job as a courtroom reporter in a murder trial. And she's further disturbed by the behavior of her young son, Harvey, who is miserable about the his cleft palate that has made him the target of bullies. All four of these characters are heard in alternating sections. Lil has been correlating the entries in her journal and letters, recalling affectionate memories of their two children growing up, and dark events as well, especially Frank's infidelity. The mystery of death is a subtext here, since Frank studied burial rituals in his days as a professor, and Lil has worked in a nursing home close to the end of life for many patients. These fragmentary sections develop into a rich, poignant tapestry that illustrates the complexities of married life seen against the social and cultural climates of our time. The Great Offshore Grounds by Vanessa Veselka. This ambitious novel, I think, is just coming out, but it's already been nominated for the National Book Award. Two half-sibling sisters, Livy and Cheyenne, both 33 years old, and their mother, Kristen, are the characters around whom this sprawling, densely plotted novel spins. Once members of the middle class, they are now contending with near poverty after failed marriages and careers. The sisters know that Kristen raised them both as their mother, but she is the biological mother of only one of them. Which one, she won't tell. Their father was a philanderer who obviously impregnated two women at once. So one strand of this complex plot has the sister searching for the elder mother. The plot swarms with many misadventures and events, some of them quite funny, all of them offbeat and interesting. The sisters' journeys and that of their adopted half-brother, Essex, take them cross-country into various communities. Cheyenne, almost penniless, returns to the college town where she had lived with her ex-husband. Livy heads to Alaska, where she becomes a sailor's apprentice and an activist protesting offshore drilling. Essex joins the army to earn some money and is sent to boot camp. Meanwhile, Kristen gets a diagnosis of terminal cancer and summons them all for a reconciliation. Veselka, the author, blends fascinating details about various low-paying jobs in our culture. Many of them we don't read about, we are not aware of, and that's what gives this book its timely relevance, especially Life on a Fishing Ship with Livy. The theme here is expressed in intimate descriptions of contemporary American poverty, how hard it can be for hardworking but unfortunate people just to keep their heads above water. This gritty, unsentimental work is funny and deeply human. The Cold Millions by Jess Walker. You'll be reading about this book. You'll probably want to put it on reserve at the library right away. It's terrific. It's a gripping, tumultuous, historical novel set in the labor riots that occurred in Spokane, Washington in 1909, 1910. I remember studying the Wobblies in 8th grade social studies. I think, but you will re-encounter them in this very good book. Two siblings, 16-year-old Rye Dolan and his dashing older brother, Gig, have been looking for seasonal work and train hopping with other hobos between jobs. They settle, they think, temporarily in Spokane, the old Klondike town that has now grown into a busy city, where there's a huge gap between the lives of wealthy mine owners and the poor laborers who work in their mines. Rye is arrested during a riot when he joins men fighting for fair pay and decent treatment. He's charged with disorderly conduct, and his lawyer introduces him to a real person, a 19-year-old activist named Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. In real life, Flynn was an early feminist and a fiery union organizer. Who knew? In this book, she has come to Spokane to advocate for, and this is a quote, the cold millions with no chance in the world. The brothers also made Ursula the Great, a bawdy vaudevillian who wins Gig's heart despite her involvement with a mining boss. The novel's cast mixes fictional characters and historical figures, such as, and these are real, labor lawyer Fred Moore, police chief John Sullivan, and labor organizers John Walsh and Frank Little. This is a splendid postmodern rendition of the social realist novels that were written in the 1930s. Think Steinbeck and Dos Paso. And this is updated with strong female characters and executed with vibrancy. Scenes of labor strife and romantic entanglement alternate at a brisk pace, and the similarities to our own time, labor unrest, feminist demands, and the gap between rich and poor is captivating. Transcendent Kingdom, Yagasi. I spoke about this novel on a previous list, but the publication was delayed, and it's important enough book because it's now getting a lot of critical attention, so I want to recommend it again. It's a powerful study of cultural displacement, dashed hopes, and new beginnings. The narrator, Gifty, is working toward a doctorate in neuroscience at Stanford. It's been a hard road for her to get there. She, her parents, and her brother emigrated from Ghana to Huntsville, Alabama, not exactly a welcoming community to people from Ghana. Her father, disillusioned with the lack of a good job, he can't find one, returns to Ghana, leaving her mother as sole breadwinner, working long hours as a caregiver in other people's homes. Gifty's beloved older brother was on the path to a college scholarship. On the strength of his athletic ability, became hooked on heroin after an injury on the basketball court, and he died of an overdose before graduating from high school. Gifty's mother sank into a deep depression, and she tried to commit suicide. But she found some solace with the pastor of an evangelical church, where paradoxically most of the members were white, but the pastor was very compassionate. It's now several years later. She's become suicidal again and has come to live with Gifty, where she's taken to bed, totally depressed. Gifty, of course, goes off to work every day. She is determined to find the scientific basis for her family's suffering. Thus, she is conducting experiments that study reward-seeking behavior in mice. This is her question. Why do some mice push the same lever over and over again, hoping for a sweet reward, though they know they are likely to be hit by random electric shocks? And she does her research. Although Gifty is focused on science, she also finds herself hungering for her childhood faith. She is reckoning spiritually and intellectually with her family's striving and loss. So this is a novel about faith, science, religion, and family, about addiction and depression and grief. But due to the author's extraordinary talent, it is cogent and engrossing, and spoiler alert, it ends on a very affirmative note, glad to say. While I was waiting for the books, I read a lot of short stories, so I've chosen 4 of them. The first 4 collections. The first, Sorry for Your Trouble by Richard Ford, F-O-R-D. The 9 short stories in his always dependable collection are straightforward, with themes clearly delineated and meanings clear. When you finish, you know what you've read, and you know what the author wanted you to understand. Most of the characters are middle-aged, middle-class men who have endured illness, divorce, the loss of jobs, and relationships. Many are lonely and alone, but unable to clearly see where their lives went wrong. Ford's precise observation of daily life and his pitch-perfect dialogue place these stories squarely in this decade, and we can certainly understand them. To Be a Man by Nicole Krauss, this book will be published very soon, if it's not just out. It's a very different sort of collection. I love to have a variety. I always admire Krauss's stories, even if they leave me with a sense of deep discomfort rather than an exact epiphany. The 10 ambitious stories here wrestle with existential questions about human connection, sexuality, and desire. They range over the globe, settings from Japan to Switzerland to South America, but the concerns are universal. Parents grapple with regret and questions of the legacies they will leave behind. And in some stories, young people explore their sexual power and the vulnerability that accompanies it. Most of these stories in this collection feature male characters as fathers, thus the title. Characters as fathers, lovers, friends, and even a lost husband. Krauss likes to ask questions and leave the answers somewhat opaque. The story, Switzerland, is set in a boarding house for young girls in Geneva, where Krauss has said she herself was sent as a young adolescent. The male character here is hardly seen, but he's very important. He seduces one of the adolescent girls, who seems fully aware that she is being sexually abused, but she is defiant in asserting her independence. All of Krauss's characters attempt to achieve a balance between sex and intimacy, freedom and safety, self-discovery and sacrifice. The stories are worth reading, even if they leave you a bit discomforted. Like Sarah Shunlian Byam, she's a new author to me and quite charming. She has a gift for precise observation with a very delicate touch, unlike the two previous collections I talked about. The stories here range among several genres, from the updating of an ancient fable to a contemporary father trying to fathom his daughter's life, understand her really, through her Instagram feeds. The author's grasp of sensory and emotional detail is distinctively different from other contemporary authors in this craft. Her stories are delicate, enchanting, often mystical, always satisfying. Many are set in childhood or adolescence. Many of the characters are Black. They are childhood friends, parents, lovers, aware of their bodies, and the mysteries of sexual attraction. The last collection is by Emma Klein, a very popular writer. Her novel last year was a bestseller. The disappointments and I read faster than I can speak. The disappointments and dissatisfactions that trouble the daily lives of the men and women in these 10 stories are clearly mirrored in 21st century culture and society. Most are upper middle class people who know their lives have gone wrong, but refuse to acknowledge the faults that have led to drug addiction, job loss, or failed affairs. Klein relates them all in cool, dispassionate prose with precise observations about family dynamics, fractured friendships, dashed creative ambitions, and sexual transactions. Okay, some nonfiction. The most beautiful book. Memorial Drive, Natasha Trethewey. She is a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet who, in this haunting memoir, reveals the defining event of her creative life. When she was 19, her mother was brutally murdered by her unstable ex-husband, not Trethewey's father. A tragedy that occurred because a policeman who was supposed to be guarding her mother's home had left his post. It has taken the author 30 years to confront this double trauma, but she doesn't describe the murder until the second half of the book. First, she draws a portrait of the close, loving mother-daughter relationship that formed the firm bond between them. Her warm and comforting mother guided her through the anxieties of being a mixed race child of what was then called miscegenation in Mississippi. Dorothy's mother was one of a valiant line of women in her family whose legacy of resilience gave each generation the strength to deal with racism and domestic violence. In luminous lyrical prose, remember her, she is a poet, Treadway slowly and steadily builds toward the unavoidable but fated murder. It's a beautiful tribute, both devastating, beautiful to read, and utterly unforgettable. The Last Million, David Nasaw. When World War II ended, there were millions of lost and homeless survivors living in Germany. Many of these displaced persons were from Poland, and many of them were from the Baltic countries. Most had been drafted into forced labor, and not all of them were eager to return home for political reasons. About 250,000 of these people, displaced people, were Jews who had managed to survive in concentration camps or work camps. The British and American authorities wanted to get them all resettled quickly, and so they announced they would all, everyone, be sent back to the countries from which they had come. And Nasaw, the author, writes that, quote, political expediency won out over humanitarian rationalism for resettling, because Jewish survivors knew that they would be massacred. This happened if they had to go back to Poland. President Trump here in America knew that he wouldn't be able to get an immigration bill through Congress. So he pressured the British government to provide sanctuary in Palestine. The British firmly refused, and of course, as we all know, they eventually ended its mandate over Palestine and walked away. America also acted shamelessly, stalling any consideration of displaced persons as immigrants. Finally, Congress finally passed a bill in 1948, severely limiting the number of Jewish displaced persons who could be admitted, because, blatant with anti-Semitic bigotry, the bill insinuated that all European Jews were communists. So under that bill, many former Nazis and war criminals were admitted to America. Jews were kept out, forced to live in displaced persons camps for as long as 5 years after the armistice. Nassaw's research has documented an important historical era. In The Daughters of Yalta, we're back in World War II, a little before the end of the war, when FDR, Churchill, and Stalin met in the Crimean city of Yalta in 1945 during the waning days of World War II. Hopes were high for the restoration of democracy in the post-war world. Franklin Delano Roosevelt brought his daughter Anna, who was keeping the secret between her and her father's doctor that Roosevelt had terminal heart failure. She came as his aide, that really hoping to ensure that his tenuous health would not get worse during what was bound to be stressful negotiations. Sarah Churchill left her post in the RAF to accompany her father, Winston. Averell Harriman, the United States ambassador to England, delegated his daughter, Kathy, with the job of setting up this conference in the 3 badly dilapidated palaces that would house and feed close to 100 military and security officials and personnel. This was fascinating to me. Now, the hindsight of history has declared that Yalta was a failure. Roosevelt had a deluded idea that his personal bond with Stalin would pave the way for world peace. But Stalin was wily, dangerous, and of course totally treacherous. After promising free elections in Poland, he arranged for just the opposite in the first step of extending Soviet power over Eastern Europe. This was yet to come. But seeing these events, the conference, through the eyes of the three women, adds fresh insights into the historical narrative. The author does a wonderful job of describing each of these women. In addition to documenting their responsibilities at Yalta, she reveals their family relationships, their romances and marriages, and most powerfully, their fierce loyalty to their fathers and their countries. One more book by a local author, which I wish we'd all had this book a year ago in time to consider its contents. It's called The Uninformed Voter. It's by Robert Levine. This urgently timely study of how democratic institutions can fail if citizens vote without accurate knowledge of their candidates' true political beliefs is a wake-up call. Using assiduous and deep research, Levine provides evidence that many of us vaguely know, but not statistically know. He shows that many Americans are apathetic about their democratic privilege or influenced by a variety of factors that have nothing to do with the candidate's qualifications, or, sad to say, are actively deceived by political corruption. And sadly, as we know, but we have not often seen documented, often these people vote against their own best interests. He notes that the United States is now ranked 31st, low, 31st, in the assessment of the world's most liberal democracies. He compares American political corruption with situations in other countries around the world, including Hungary and Russia. And he concludes that democracy is in distress worldwide. And he demonstrates with cool facts and figures how easily autocracy can grow in nationalist regimes. This is a scary book, but important. Now, I just want a few more words because I can't just end with a scary book. It turns out that I've read several important books since I compiled this list. And there are several that I'd read before and couldn't include. So I'm going to give you a hint of the books you should be looking for, and maybe we'll talk about again soon. The first is called Leave the World Behind. It's by Rumaan Alam, and it's been nominated for the National Book Award and has already been cast as a movie that will star Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington. I'll tell you a little bit. A middle-class couple from New York and their two pre-adolescent children have rented a luxurious house in the Hamptons for a summer vacation. Late during the first night, very late during the first night they're there, a couple who claim to be the owners of the house show up, terribly frightened and asking to come in and stay. They say that there's been a blackout in New York and they fled the city. They are upper middle class, in their 60s, wealthy too, and they are black. Are they really who they say they are? This is just the beginning of this disorienting novel called Leave the World Behind. Next book you should look for, Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. This is a book set in near future world where climate change has caused mass extinctions of animals, fish, and forests. A young ornithologist goes on what she thinks will be a final quest. It's a thriller as well as a literary novel. The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. She is the author of Room. She has now written a book about a nurse in a badly overcrowded and understaffed hospital in Dublin during the flu epidemic of 1918. Good, fabulous book. Now, coincidentally, there's another novel just about to be published about a nurse fighting exhaustion in the present day. It's called Rest and Be Thankful. It's by Emma Glass, and a young, exhausted nurse in a neonatal ward in London works night shifts and deals with very sick infants and babies and finds herself on the edge of burnout. Now, another book that I know you'll hear about, Jack by Marilynne Robinson. I count Marilynne Robinson as one of my favorite authors, one of the most important writers in America. Jack, the central character in this novel, named after him, has already been a disturbing figure in Robinson's Pulitzer Prize-winning Gilead cycle. Now, this prodigal son is the central figure in this highly awaited study of his life. Friends and Strangers, this book has been out for a while. I've just gotten to it. It's by J. Courtney Sullivan. It's an astute portrait of the relationship between two women, a young first-time mother, and the college senior she hires as a babysitter. I'm going to leave you with those. I'm going to hope that maybe in a while I can talk about those books and others that I have read and still reading, especially the big books that will be coming through soon. And meanwhile, I wish you good reading. Some of these books I've talked about are rather dark, but so is the time we live in. And they all offer a way to immerse ourselves in a better version of life that we all hope will be ours in the future. So thank you for listening, and thank you to the library.
Thank you, Sybil. Without you, we would never know what to read. So I know our patrons always look to your suggestions. So for those of you watching at home, all these books will be available in multiple formats through westportlibrary.org, and you can always find previous Sybil's lists through our resources section of the webpage as well. So thank you again, and as Sybil said, happy reading.
Bye-bye.